Well, and on what I'm sailing boat these days, certainly cruising is like ours, there's a whole lot more behind the scenes rather than just pull the anchor up and raise the sail. When to operate the boat, there's quite a few electronics involved. There's obviously the navigation system, the chart plotter and the autopilot that then comes with the system for controlling the power system. We have solar panels and alternator feeding it, and we have 3 sets of batteries that need to be all charged and managed in sync. And there's various other bits and pieces going around that I'll show you to do with safety and tracking and so forth. I'll get into the details, but the issue here was it's damn complex and a whole lot of things to remember when you're underway and so forth. And now that I'm by myself, I actually notice really how much it is. When we divide it between the two of us, there's always somebody to remember to press the right button. But now it's got to all happen in the right order at the right time. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So got me thinking. And we had recently visited a friend's boat or something. We met on the beach somewhere and had a look. And he had sort of interesting setup where he had a Rasperry Pi. It's these small hobby computers or hobbyist computers that he kind of put. He literally had it under this chart table with lots of wires going around over the place. And they're all, it looked, anyway, it was appealing, but there's quite a bit of electronics involved. And I thought there must be a simpler solution. And I discovered that our fancy Victron power system actually has got a computer built in. And I'm going to show you what I did with it today. So I'm going to run first through all the bits and pieces, the parts that make up the electronic system of the boat, really sort of lay out a little bit what we've got to bring together. And then I'll show you how I pull it together and what I can undo with that, and how I think it's going to make our life, a lot easier. Let's have a look. So let's start by looking at the Rasperry system that was built into the boat when we first got it. It's quite an expensive installation, I would imagine, because it is state-of-the-art equipment for this kind of boat. It consists of a chart plotter that we're looking at here and a built-in autopilot that controls the rudder, and a few sensors to go with that as well. Now with that, it's all very well. However, the chart plotter has since given up, not quite as ghost, it's still operating as you can see, but the touchscreen no longer works, which makes it not very useful. And also gives us a sense it's reaching its end of its lifetime, perhaps. In any case, we can still manipulate it through the knobs, zoom in the chart and so forth. And it's still part of the system, so it can still be fed information through what's called the C-Talk network, as it's installed provided by Rasperry. So that works. And obviously the autopilot still works, so it's all good. But to make it a bit more useful for us, we've installed a couple of frames here so we can set our boat tablet in it with alternative navigation software. But here we go already. There's 2 things going separate. So the next shot here is of the autopilot control unit. Turn it on, we're on anchor, so it's obviously standby, it's pointing a certain direction. But everything we can do on this little unit, we can also do programmatically. That's very important to keep in mind. So here we have the new chart plotter, the Rasperry unit, multifunction display, as one's called it. It's primarily a radar display, but knowing that the old chart plotter was on its last legs, we got the full spec unit, and that allows us to basically do everything the chart plotter in the cockpit can do, plus show us the radar. At this stage, it's actually much more useful to have it mounted down here for navigation purposes. So this actually works quite well, and we probably won't move it into the cockpit yet. It's a major, and it loses that functionality of having it here. So in this shot, we have 3 more parts of the puzzle. First, the VHF that we're looking at, that is for boat-to-boat communications. But it also has a crucial safety function that it can send so-called DSC alerts. They basically send a message via VHF, which includes the boat position and boat identification. Now, to get the boat position, it obviously needs to have a GPS signal, and that's received from other devices on the boat via the network it's plugged into. So you probably can't see this, but in small print at the bottom, it gives the current GPS position. Now that comes from, one is the chart plotter in the cockpit actually has a GPS built in. So that still feeds that into the network and is used by other devices. It's good position because it's clear and open to the sky. Alternative devices are all down below deck. I've tested them and they actually come with the same signal, but it's redundancy. Then on top of the VHF unit, we've got a couple of things squeezed in. First, the gray box to the right, the cable interface to the Starlink router. So from there, then gives us a connection that allows us to connect the Starlink router to the boat network, which is the yellow little box there. That's our onboard Wi-Fi router. And everything that we're going to be looking at further on actually goes through that little box here. And it provides already some simple things. So for example, not hidden, but behind this box here is the AIS transmitter. AIS is the automatic identification system. I'll come back to that later. But basically what it does, it sends off a little signal also via the VHF antenna on another band, but I think it's close to the VHF spectrum, that gets picked up by other boats in radio range. And from that, they can see our position, which we'll look at that ourselves as well. It becomes visible on their chart plotter and can also be used by systems for collision avoidance. That's another part of the network system here. We have a Vespa brand AIS transmitter. I wish that phone would stop sending notifications. And then that transmits through our signal. And we'll look at how we can then pick that back up again and see things on the chart plotter. And there's actually more to that whole story. So that's the onboard network that does that. So one of the things that the Wi-Fi router then allows us to do is to be able to see on our phones with our chart plotter software to see positions of other vessels in the vicinity. That gets transmitted through the Wi-Fi network. So now we come to the heart of the system. There's a whole lot of boxes and cables here. So I'll talk you through it slowly. On the left-hand side is obviously this switch panel, which controls all the electrical systems on the boat. It's pretty self-explanatory. But then we've got a whole lot of blue boxes. They're part of the Victron power system. So actually, let's jump to the right first. The big blue box top right, that's the main charge controller from the main solar panels out aft. And that feeds through the red and black cables dropping down from it, through circuit breakers, to the batteries, the main house batteries, which are charged there. Then we have a secondary panel here, which unfortunately had different characteristics from the main solar panels. So need a separate charge controller. It's a blue box centered bottom. So that also feeds into the system there and supplements the current going in there. Part of the Victron network, so it is compatible. And there's a third charge controller, which is tucked away in the bow of the boat. And that's a so-called DC to DC charger, which basically takes current from the main house batteries and then recharges the starter battery. So that feeds all into there. Now, just to make life more interesting, and we won't see much detail of that, but in fact, our house battery is a hybrid system of lithium iron combined with AGM batteries. Lots of pros and cons for that, but it's a whole different story in its own right. For now, we'll just treat that as one unit, which is being fed through the main circuit breakers there, coming from the two solar charge controllers. Now, there's another charging unit, of course, which is the boat alternator. It's not wired to the network, so it's not intelligent in that sense. But it is programmed to kind of go in sync with everything else, and so basically triggers same sort of voltages, so that they all kind of remain compatible, and it seems to work. So that's where we're at. Now, there's one box left here. Well, there's two parts to it. The top blue box in the center there, the so-called Cerbo, which some of you may know actually means brain in Latin. And underneath it is the screen, which is used to control it and with space information. That's really the brains of the power system. So all the charge control and so forth is done from there. It also feeds to the inverter, which is another blue box packed away in another part of the boat, which takes DC voltage from the house battery, goes to AC voltage, 230 actually, because back home we're in 230 volts. But just to make things even more interesting, because we had all these 110 volt AC tools and so forth on the boat, we added a so-called transformer to that transforms the 230 AC current to 110 volt. We've got different power points on the boat according to what appliance we need to plug in. So that's this part here. Come back to the Cerbo. So it shows and controls lots of info on that little display there, which is extremely useful and monitored very closely for us to make sure the batteries are charged in a healthy state. They've got enough current in there. So if we don't have enough, that we make sure we don't drain the batteries unnecessarily and run the engine for a little bit, and or reduce power usage by, I don't know, turning the fridge off overnight, those kind of things. However, I discovered that the Cerbo can also be programmed. We'll get back to that in a moment. So one of the indispensable devices on the boat is also a phone, and that's great. It's always to hand, but it's not always to hand. And before you know it, you've left it down somewhere down below, or more often than not, it's discharged, and then you're kind of fiddling around trying to get the right app up, and then you need another app, and so forth. But I'll show you what we use it for. So our most important use, I guess, is using the boating app of Navionics here, through which we use for all navigation, and so that basically shows us where we are, where we're going. We can set a course on it, and so forth. So that's obviously very useful, and it comes with a whole lot of functionality that I don't need to talk about now. But another one is when we put the anchor down, we get another app out, got to start it, set the anchor, and then make sure the phone doesn't die overnight because it's out of battery, the alarm goes off, and it's not on sleep mode or whatever. Just it still kind of takes a lot of attention, let alone pressing the right buttons when we go in, when we drop the anchor, not. So that's what we got, fairly as it is. That's what we have. There's other apps here as well that really get used. I won't delve into right now. There's no foreign land. We'll look at that on the online version. There's marine traffic, which basically shares AIS reports from that are reported via satellite. Just got to make that clear. So AIS, remember, is a signal that gets broadcast on a VHF-like frequency between boats. That's the most important use. But it also is transmitted by satellite, so that vessels that are over the horizon can see each other, and also whatever happens to your VHF signal, you can always have it there. So here, right now, if I bring that up, just to give you an idea, I just want to show you the screen of the millions of signals that are out there. Okay, just starting up. Take a moment to load, and then signing me in. Bear with me, we need it here. So right now, this is Nukuhiva, and we see some boats reported from there that, like me, are uploading via satellite. And then here's me, and now this is pretty magic. So this is a boat that just arrived, called Polarix. In fact, I think in the video this is going to appear afterwards, but we'll get to that. But basically they have the AIS running, so I'm seeing that. Now what I'm doing is, because I'm linked by Starlink, my AIS transmitter is connected to this little server here that we're looking at, and one of the pieces of software it's running is forwarding all the AIS signals. So basically I'm reporting my own position as well as that of Polarix, and transmitting it to the server in the cloud, which then basically shares the information with all other boats that download information again through this app or other related apps. So if I zoom out a bit, I just want to give you an idea what this looks like. Now you can see all these signals of boats here. Those be all commercial fishing boats and so forth that are around the place, but they're all basically transmitting their AIS signal via satellite, and it's being shared here online with everything. So amongst others, it's also a way of keeping track of vessels. Yeah. So if Maria wants to know where I am, she basically fires up marine traffic and checks on that, and then gets very alarmed when I've turned the AIS transmitter off. So that's another app we have. Yeah, and then there's obviously all the weather apps. The three key sites that we're using here at the moment are Predict Wind as the main go-to. It's a New Zealand company as well, but it's a global leader. That's how they advertise themselves, and I think they are in terms of just good weather forecast for sailors. Another one, just as good, and for some users they actually prefer it. We use it as well. It's called Windy. They complement each other, and it's nice to have two opinions, even though basically they use the same weather models. They're just presenting them differently. And then lastly, there's the French Meteo France, which of course has the Polynesian services here, and they're pretty good as well, so they're worth paying attention to. Right, so there you go. And being a phone, it's got lots of other uses, apps and so forth, things to record and keep track of. But there we go, that's one of the many devices that we have on the boat that are critical to our sailing experience. Come to what all this palaver was all about, the new features that the system offers. So just to recap, so what I've done, I've basically set up a what's called a signal case server, and we can delve into that a bit later more, to run off the Cerbo, which is the heart of the power system, which allows some software to be installed. So it's actually quite separate from the power system, except that it shares all the communications with it, and this is key. Beyond that, it does what a Raspberry Pi would do for other people, just a whole lot less wiring needed because it's already plugged into it all. So let's just have a look in here what we've got here. So on the screen here, this is a quick overview screen that I put together. So basically I'm using an app called Kep here that runs off the server and is shown here in a web page. So it's continually updated, and this is kind of what I want it to be a default display that's basically on the tablet on all the time. So it's basically screen's always on. You basically can always just glance at this on the way through. So this allows us to see where the boat is in respect to the anchor. You can see here I set a alarm at, I think it's 40 meters or so. I can look that up elsewhere, but it basically means that if the anchor drags, I'm going to go across the alarm there, and we have another buzzing alarm go off and wake us up or make us look outside. At the moment, Polarix, good on them. They still got the AIS on, so I can see exactly where they are, and I can also see their movements. If they keep that on, I'll see exactly where they move as they're anchored. So for what that's worth, and I can zoom out a bit more and just show the whole of Anaha Bay. No other boats are shown on here because nobody else got their AIS on. This is not a radar, but at least it gives me a sense of where I am. And let's see a bit more. I kind of disappear off the map here. But anything that I can pick up on the AIS, which is, as I said, runs off the VHF antenna, in other words, by sight, we can record. Interestingly, before, when I was first turned this on this morning, I could actually see Polarix, zoom out, about here as they were coming around. So it was going over the pass here, and the pass is, I don't know, probably 30 meters high or so. So it's obviously more than just line of sight. And I guess it's the same as a VHF reception would be. It would just kind of pass a little bit over land, as long as it's not too high. Once they moved over here, I lost them until they came around the point again. So let's see what else we got here. So this is just it's another chart plot, if you like. And if I move on it, I can actually see things, and I can actually have various chart controls on here. But we won't go into the details here. It's really by the point. By the way, we've got better chart plotters, and this one is of interest to see what's happening to anchorage. So looking to the right hand side, nice and bright, see what the time is from a distance. Next to it, we've got sunrise and sunset times, always good to know, especially if I've got invited people for sunset. And then next, high tide and low tide, also useful to know our current position. And then the weather forecast. This actually comes off a barometer that's plugged into the network and gives me information. This one here, and basically it records barometer trends and does what some experienced barometers would do. I'm not, but they could look at the different indications and the trends here and make directions from that. I've actually got a whole lot more I'll put that on a whole separate weather screen so we can get back to that. But we come back to what we need to know, want to know by just standing there, coming by during the day. Obviously, state of charge of the battery, the current voltage, that tells me what's going on. Looks like I'm going to have to run the engine for a little bit because I like to be at about 40% by night time. Probably half an hour will do it. Down here, we've got the current load going out, so I can see if there's anything unusual on, and that would alert me to, hey, I've left, I don't know what on. Also, if I turn the fridge off, what I would say, and so forth. And here, same wattage. There's no charge going in at the moment. Sun's low, it's cloudy, so not much happening there. But so that balance would tell me during the day whether I'm going to have to worry about it or not. So that's that. Let me show you another screen here. So when we're underway, I just flick this over, and remember this screen here, we actually look at it on my computer at the moment, but I can have the same screen on the boat tablet, which is mainly meant for, and also on my phone at the same time. It can also be, there's no conflict there. So once we're underway, this is what we'd actually then mount back on the multifunction display. Remember, I had this little brackets on there so I could mount it on there. So this is what we would have there during the day. It's nice clear black on white on black. It's reasonably readable even in low light conditions, or rather bright conditions. And here, so I've got key information again. So obviously the autopilot is on standby at the moment, but it would tell me what's going on. I have on there, again, tides are good to know, and the height of the tide, especially when you're getting ready to anchor. And then down here, obviously anchor's down at the moment. So when I'm ready to go, I just click on here and raise the anchor. But I don't even need to do that, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But you can see at the moment, more the other way around. When we can arrive in the anchorage, I want to be able to click on here without coming to a different screen or picking up the phone, clicking apps, just drop anchor, and then set the anchor radius, excuse me, according to how much chain we put out. So then we've got here track speed and track bearing. These are actually two values that, one of the annoying things is when you look at the display, it's just always flicking around there. You can see at the moment here. It's obviously because we're not underway, the numbers don't all make sense. But basically once we're underway, we've got both the bearing and the speed always flicking back and forth just because the measurements all over the show. So what I've done, I've wrote a little function in JavaScript that allowed that basically took two measurements a minute apart and averaged them out. So that would just then makes these numbers here, the track bearing, the track speed, a lot more steady and more true to what's actually going on. And then we've got a heading in the autopilot, and we've got an actual bearing over ground at the moment. So we would also typically have a waypoint set in the autopilot. And again, the autopilot tells the whole network what where it's going, and that's picked up here by the server that then provides numbers here to display to show us where we're actually meant to be going and how long it will be before we get there. So it doesn't make any sense. And here just a few more interesting displays in terms of angle and so forth. I haven't got a wind indicator yet, but once we have that, it's something to buy in New Zealand and bring back and mount on the mast. We'll also have a little wind speed and wind indication here. So what we're left with is current date and time and position, and then again a little bit weather information there, and a bit of info about what the electric system's up to. Just all the bare information that we want while we're underway without giving too much more. So what else I got here? The boat system's a whole lot of mix of numbers that are quite meaningless unless you're kind of troubleshooting something like I sometimes am. But just to give you an idea anyway. So I've got lots of numbers here. And this is where the Victron system comes to play again, because that's all the numbers they come from there. And they're really not really particularly interesting unless you've got a problem, because then you can work out where the voltage drop is, where the current is actually going to and not going to, and also if you're kind of doing things on board, you can see what's happening to the voltage and power and so forth. And that's often you just basically go around, turn device on and off to see which one is actually causing the problem. So this is where the screen comes into. So hopefully not used too often. I've got one more set up, which is basically the weather, and that plays around with barometer trends quite a bit.
So the barometer lasts 10 minutes. Should really update this. This needs a bit of tweaking. So because I want the barometer trends over the last day or two. But basically the information is there, and that's what the program is using here really to kind of come up with all these trends and observations. So at the moment we've basically got the barometer trend, it's slowly falling. So that tells, this is old, Siemens law really. Just got to keep track of the barometer. I'm not sure if you can see it in the picture here, but we have one here. But not that we will look at it too often because it's just too tedious to write down all the numbers and try to remember them. So here we go. Software does that for us, and it tells us that if it's slowly falling like this, that means we're probably between a low and a high, and that translates to a forecast of less than 4.6 winds, and which is basically in layman's words less than a strong breeze. But there should be a warm off front approaching, which makes sense between low and high. At the moment it continues to fall, and apparently the front wind has backed and increasing. Well, there we go. So anyway, it adds up all the information there is and tells us what goes on with that. So useful, particularly if one kind of looks at it regularly enough, together with the online weather apps that we use. So these are the main displays. I've got another one. I'll just stop this for now, and then I can bring the next screens up.
Show you the chart plotter that we are replacing avionics with. It's called OpenCPN. OpenCPN stands for Open Software, and that means it's free. It's much more flexible. You're not tied into the avionics system, and can do a lot more with it. No little thanks to all the plugins that other users are producing for that. The other beauty about it is that I can download all sorts of charts from all over the place. So here, for example, I've got a navigation chart, but I can also apply aerial shots from different sources. Now here it's probably just interesting, but in the Tuamotus, in the atolls, it was actually really crucial because it's only the satellite shots that show you where all the coral bommies are. And as you can see here, if I get a few different ones, you can see that some of them do catch clouds. So if that kind of cuts across the path you want to go, it's nice to have another aerial shot to kind of compare with and make sure that you can see everything. So the other thing I can do on here is the obvious. Obviously I can look at the chart in detail and see what's going on here. I have more detailed charts than this as well. But I can also use it for course plotting. So I just put in a course for the next leg of my journey here. I'm going to go right around the island. I'm going to plan to stop around here. There's some interesting canyons to discover there. So I kind of plotted a course that I want to follow out. You can see that kind of runs around here, and that I can then use for navigation and put into the autopilot. I can either do that manually, or once I get the software configured, I can also get the software here to put that in through the autopilot. Now while we're doing this here, it's actually quite interesting. I can just see a boat coming in there on the AIS. It's so AIS is telling me it's Polarix. It's doing 4 knots over ground in its current course, and it's going to end up right next to me because the empty slot here in the bay for anchoring is literally next to me. So I'll get to see them later on and get to meet them. I've been spotting them on the chart all over the place, so I look forward to meeting them. So OpenCPN is actually a whole lot of features in there that are worth exploring in their own right. But what matters here, it's actually tied into the network system. So for example, the AIS position reports I get here, they come through the NMA network. We'll talk about a little bit more about that, but they're basically being transmitted on the network from the AIS transceiver that I showed you before. From there, they go through the NMA network cable, and then into that, in turn, I've got a little Wi-Fi interface plugged in that transmits it via Wi-Fi to all the devices on the boat through the yellow router. And so I can see that on here, and equally I can see that on my boating app on Navionics, and also in other apps that we'll look at later on. So I just want to try something out here. I haven't done it. Where is it? I have an AIS radar here somewhere. Where are we? That's it. And that brings up a little chart here, which shows me only the boats. Now if it gets busy somewhere, obviously it's quite interesting. 32 miles is quite wide. Let's zoom in a bit. 4 miles. So again, I can see on here what's going on, and the name of the boat is marked Polarix. So in there I can do a few things on. Now I hope, it's a faint hope, that they might leave their AIS on at board, which I do, because then we're able to spot that on the anchor watch as well. Quite interesting that. So on the anchor watch that I'll show you in a moment, I can track my own boat movements, but I can also see other boats that are transmitting AIS signals. All right, you can hear the anchor alarm going off there. That's the boat about to collide with us, with Polarix. You see it, we're in anchorage here, and I shouldn't need the collision alarm on, but it's good to see that it's working, and it's warning me that this boat is about to hit us. I can see from the track here they're just moving around to find someone to put the anchor down, but it does show the collision alarm works, and that basically goes off the AIS, and it's trying to wake us up here saying, hey, if I'm asleep at night, it'll wake me up, should imagine, and say, urgent, 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 get off, get to the hell and do something about this. All right, that works. Now I can see if I can turn it off here. Should be able to. No, it's not available here. So, right. I still need to find out how to turn this one off here. I guess one way is to get out of the way. Hopefully it'll turn off in a moment. Waiting. I'm going to pause the video in a moment and just let us come back again once we've gone and gotten over this. Got a live action here. I may as well continue and use the arrival of Polarix to introduce you to No Foreign Land. So No Foreign Land is a website set up by sailors for sailors, and it's not quite Facebook because it's not sort of quite socialized, but it's a great app that firstly lets you keep track of friends and other boats, at least those that subscribed, and secondly it shares information that you discover about the place. So look, what we're looking at here is the current anchorage, and I can see one boat on there already, which is Quad du Sud. People I already made friends for. In fact, they're coming around for sunset drinks tonight. And then the Polarix boats that just arrived here, they, like most other No Foreign Land users, they obviously have to kind of settle in first and then press a button on their app to record the new anchorage. But let's work out how to do this. If we just go and look for them, let's go look for Polarix and see who they are and where they've been. There you go. So it's Anne and Benny, World Cruiser since 2018. Now their last location is, let's zoom in a bit, or rather out. So this is Tayo Bay, where I came from myself as well. And you can see there's a few other boats. At a guess, I'd say half the cruisers these days are No Foreign Land, especially those that want to meet other people. We often kind of track down kids' boats on that. All right, I'm going to come back to all this other icons here, but let's just zoom out a bit, because this is the south of the island. So it's basically where they would have come from where they last recorded their spot. We can actually do more. We can actually look at their whole journey and see where they've been and come from. So you can see they came from the south and they came through around here. In fact, when I first arrived in Nukuhiva about 2 weeks ago, I was anchored just around where my cursor is there now. And I saw them pop in basically into the bay and thought either it's too crowded or they didn't like the scenery. But then they moved on, and later on I spotted them having anchored up here. So, and then obviously they returned here to what's called Daniels Bay, also a really nice anchorage, came back to Tayo, and then reprovisioned. They've obviously been here already. Look, they were over there. They've been here already before. They also were in the bay around the corner by the village. Come around a bit. So obviously they're just spending a lot of time here. Now today they would have, once they update the track, it will show them coming from here to here. Now that will give a straight line over land, which doesn't look very realistic. So Maria always wants me to kind of edit the map afterwards and put in all the little waypoints along the way. And you can imagine how tedious it is and how rarely I actually get around to doing that. So with our new setup here, let's go and find ourselves my boat. And then, so you see SV New Life with Rent Maria Gort on board. Look, we've got 55 followers. Those are basically people that know us. They want to keep track of us. and know when we're around. And I can show you in a moment here. Let's just zoom back into here because we're way out. Must be a quicker way to do this. Not winning. I'm not zooming in. What's going on? All right, let's zoom out again and see what's going on. Maybe I'm a little bit too zoomed in. Here I am. Okay, so there I am back again. I just wanted to bring it up to so we can see all of Nukuhiva. Very well. Okay, and now I'm going to show my journey. There we go. That's that button there. And look at this beautiful track here that shows exactly the way I sailed, mile for mile. And this is thanks to our new server here, which basically kind of records. I can't remember what I set it to, but every 100 meters or half a mile or so, it updates the track. And then it shows beautiful track, and Maria will be so happy now. So this is the bonus. You can see beforehand when we didn't have it, we just ran straight through, came in here. So this is our original track when we first arrived. We came in, and then we went off again and headed off the island. Actually, we did a few trips back and forth. You can see this one here. This was when Carlin was still on board. We went back and forth, obviously not that way. But since I came back, I had this running, you can see how it nicely follows the track all around it. Beautiful. So that's no foreign land for you. Let's just turn this off again, because just before I leave this app, zoomed out again, you can see all these little icons here show information shared by other cruisers. So for example, I can see here that this is a protected marine area. And in fact, it is actually all, there's buoys along this line here, line there. So I'm just inside in the anchorage area that's marked out here. It's a very interesting project, and I've got another screen up here. So if you think of Signal K, that server that's running on the power system there, as basically an operating system, there's lots of little apps that one can download, and it's also quite easy actually to create some functionality yourself if one can cope with a bit of JavaScript and Node.js. But that aside, there's a few things ready made by other keen boaties. One of them is a title chart, or rather title plot, I imagine you call this. And you can see at the moment we're just past high tide here, and we can actually now see exactly what's going on with the tides, and above all know where the upcoming tides are. So this is nice to know. Somebody who ever set up this particular tidal station forgot to put in a name for it, but I believe this is the Tayo tidal station here we're downloading. It actually does this automatically. What happens is that the program picks up our GPS position and then plugs it into a service, goes online, finds the nearest tidal station and downloads that data, and that's in here then. So, and stays here until, I mean, even if we go offline, it's still available. What else we got here? Another really neat app is an online logbook. Now, there's pros and cons to keeping a logbook online. The most important one is you're bound to lose it sooner or later. But it's actually, this one is quite nice as a point of reference. So I see this being in parallel to our usual paper-bound logbook. But what it does, it actually records your track automatically. So I can see exactly which course went, where we were, and get all the GPS track here, which, by the way, I can then download and plot in a chart elsewhere. It's all digital, so no deal. But you can see that it's doing that, and it does this reasonably, and it keeps track of what's going on as well. So anyway, so looking to the right hand side, install Pi basically means it's that's what it is. That's actually when the system was first installed. So then it keeps track of when the autopilot is on and off, and you can also see, in certain wind conditions it gets changed. Now all of this is logged automatically, so it also keeps track of the anchored state. Now anchored is actually something that is either triggered by me pressing the anchored button or the boat not moving for a certain amount of time. Again, I can programmatically control that to make sure that it's triggered at the right time. But anyway, it keeps track of what we're doing, so I can see what kind of speed, average speed we do, and all these other useful data that one can play with and
analyze or theorize about and so forth, and this is where the gust came through and so forth. Now with that, I'm not quite sure if the map's installed. I think it does. I haven't configured a map to go with it yet anyway. And then there's actually a timeline. These are literally the entries go all along. Now that's all very nice, but I can actually then here also add an entry. So for example, when I've got a sail change going on, I can say, okay, whatever, filled Genoa raised sail, and whatever else I want to see. You want to always stop for a drink, and I can say exactly when that happened. I can categorize all that, and I can make a recording about the sea state. It's gone rough, and it's cloudy, and visibility has gone pretty thick. There's been thick fog, whatever. And I can add the position, and I can put that in, or I can adjust that, and I can even take different inputs, etc., etc., etc. So one can have a lot of fun here. But save. Now that kind of sits in there and it's in the log. Better remove that, but so that's a recording. So in other words, the logbook there keeps track of all the automatic happenings in the boat. One thing I'd love to add as well is engine hours. Now to do that, I've got to find some sort of sensor that can sit in there. I think the easiest way to do that is to put something in, you install it in line or around with the alternator, and then when the alternator's on, that means the engine's on, and then that feeds that. We can connect that by Bluetooth, and that will then pipe through here and be also another signal that gets picked up from the network and inserted in the logbook. So I just want to see if I can do. I thought I'd done that already. Anyway, so there's ways to also add and click the different sails you set up, just if you want to be really interested in that. I can imagine, especially people are a bit more professional at sailing, such as racers. They want to keep track of all that, of course, and then they can look at all the information and add it all up together and say, okay, that was the best sail configuration for this leg of the journey. So anyway, again, this will be useful as long as we don't make it too complicated for ourselves, and that's all good. Now, there's actually a whole lot of other apps in there that I could install and set up and tweak around with and keep myself busy until Kingdom Come. But the essentials are the KIP dashboard interface that we basically will have running all the time on the boat tablet. And then we've got extra information. We want to find the tides in 3 days' time. We look that up. We're going to look at more details, all sorts of other aspects. But let's go for, especially for the geeky amongst you, or those that want to do something like that on your boat as well. Let's have a look at the actual survey. So this is, let's go with the dashboard first. So this is basically the servo that's running on the Cerbo. Remember the Cerbo was that little blue box on the wall that was part of the power system? So that's meant to be the brains for the power system, and therefore has got software. And so when I go to the display there and change settings on it, I'm basically doing that on the Cerbo software. Now, for those that might be interested, it's a version of a Linux. Linux is an operating system like Windows and Android that runs on little gadgets like that. So for example, the Rasperry Pi that we mentioned before, that runs Linux. Now, Victron have basically got their own version of it called Venus, which is basically just a compact version that fits, that basically, it's just the essentials which they require on their, for the functions they want to do. But that has also got the option of running a Signal K. It basically comes pre-installed. And Signal K is the Linux application that people also run the Raspberry Pi to do exactly the same thing I'm doing here. So it comes built in. Great. When I discovered that, I was in business. It's again a compactor version. It's got lots of drawbacks. I spent a lot of time the first few days troubleshooting that, working out why I couldn't do certain things that other people could do on the Raspberry Pi. It's to do with limited space and the particular Victron configuration. But by the time I got my head around that, and I remapped the cache files to a USB stick I put in there and did a few things like that to make it all work. And so now I've got basically a fully operating system. So what does that involve? So I can see here that, again, we're getting a bit technical here. We're running out of battery. I might just pause for a moment and recharge the computer, because otherwise the whole thing's just going to fall down. We'll come back to exactly this window in a moment. Bear with me. All right, we're back. Computer's charged up again a bit. So I was just starting to explain the server here, and I think I got as far as saying that this is like an operating system and that it runs various services. But most importantly, it connects with the various networks in the boat. And I've only sort of hinted at them in passing. So I mentioned that the original network on the boat was SeaTalk, which is proprietary to Raymarine, and it basically connects the autopilot with the multifunction display, the rudder control, and so forth, as well actually as the depth meter, the depth sounder, and that's about it. So what I did, I basically put in a NMA. This is getting very technical now, I'm sorry, but there's standard SeaTalk is a standard or wire. A wide network. We have NMEA 0183 and NMEA 2000. Now 0183 and SeaTalk, well, basically they're kind of compatible. They can basically deal with the information that they pass through is equivalent, and 0183 and SeaTalk are pretty much the same thing, just Raymarine spec'd it slightly differently to suit their equipment, but they're interchangeable. In other words, you can plug in devices from non-Raymarine into that same network, just using slightly different connectors. When it comes to 2000, you actually need to have a little interface there. So it's actually a little mini computer, because that has to be translated into quite different language. The idea is still the same. It's a network that passes information between all sorts of different devices that share one cable and basically broadcast what they got to say, and everybody else can pick it up. That's a fundamental principle. And so basically, so I got that in. I got the 0183 adapters, so I can use equipment such as, for example, the VHF, which is 0183. But then, of course, to get it to speak to the 2000 part, I need another interface, and so forth. Let's not get stuck in the details. Then Victron has got its own network, and you can see here the so-called N2K and NMA 2000 on VE, which is part of the VE CAN, which is basically the Victron proprietary network. So they talk to each other, and this little piece of software here translates the two to each other. Gets slightly more complex, but the idea is the same. What it comes down to is that the information necessary in the boat gets basically passed around. So I can have AIS positions on my boating app. I can have the temperature or the barometer reading showing on a little web app here, and so forth. And get the whole thing also transferred through the Wi-Fi network, also via the router and a NMEA Wi-Fi interface that I also got plugged in the switchboard out of the way. So then it's got various plugins running here, and this basically is the different programs running. You've ever sort of seen something beeping? If you've ever seen a task manager in Windows, it's the same idea. Little programs running on their own and doing their own thing, talking to each other. And here's actually a list of all the programs and utilities that I've loaded here. And there's various things, but just as an example, here's a KIP. That's the interface that we're looking for, with all the displaying the anchor position and the all the displays of numbers and anything from tides to voltages. The little logbook app that we had there, and then this one's interesting. Simply AutoState. That basically switches the current stages of the boat from anchor to sailing to motoring, and you can actually, the more sensors, the more programming you do, the more different stages you can have. But it is useful again because that tells other apps what they should and shouldn't be doing, such as, for example, the logbook, or the anchor watch. If it detects, if somebody tells, "Oh, we're actually motoring," and it says, "Okay, fine, you must have raised the anchor to go motoring, and you will be, you don't need an alarm from me." So this is kind of how it works. So you can see the alarm here is watching. There's an alarm silencer that I can basically press the buttons to do. There's a barometer trend, and so forth and so forth. Derived data is also interesting because I'm basically take some of these numbers and translate them to something else. could be as simple as converting knots to kilometers an hour, but it can also do more sophisticated things, such as telling that when the alternator starts, the motor's going, things like that. Here's our tides. Okay, let's not get stuck in that. Web apps. This is really, actually, we're getting to the level where people that might be interested in this will be paying attention. So web apps is, again, application installed. So think of this as a start menu of this little server here. So we have, that's the KIP multifunction display that I showed you before. There's the anchor alarm here. That's the little page for the tides, nicely laid out as a plot, and a few other things that I can basically do to feed information to it and look at it. So Freeboard, for example, is that it's charting application that sits inside the KIP menu, and so forth and so forth. Now I can go through and look at all the data, basically look at the data that's passing through the network, and what that is useful for is just knows what kind of variables I got there. I can then use. So Node-RED here, it's actually a programming interface that uses Node.js, it's a form of JavaScript, to do fancy things, and you can basically do all of these things that we've got there. You can do them by hand like that. It's a fairly gentle programming environment as they go. You know, basically it's quite graphical, and it hides numbers as deep as it can before you really dig into it. So I've got an app store here. Again, you know that from your computer or your Android devices. It's the Play Store or the Windows Store. We download things. The difference is there's pretty much nothing much commercial there. At best, the interface is two commercial services, weather providers, for example, that users like me and you have basically created to make these little apps here. So Node-RED that's produced, I wouldn't say commercially, but professionally by the people that do. Who does that? Possibly Signal K, which comes out of a business somewhere, and the information display that I was playing with today, that's made by a German who I was just corresponding with him because I questioned him, and he's at the moment sailing in Colombia. So we just exchanged a few ideas about what his display can and shouldn't do after he helped me work out why it wasn't going. So then security is obviously passwords, things like that, and your battery's running low. Anyway, I think we've reached the end here, what we want to know about the server here, but you get the idea. It gives you lots of possibilities. It gives you lots of functionality, and it's a hobbyist dream come true. But it's also really practical because you basically get to build what you need, not really what some commercial company thinks you as the ideal customer should pay money for. So there we go. I think I'm going to wrap up my introduction there of the Signal K server that I set up here, and you've seen that it's very functional. I'm sure there's still lots of functionality I can still invent and bring in there. It now needs to be road tested, and I've got to find out what works, what doesn't work, what I need, what I don't need, and ideally I should trim it down to the minimal information and functionality that one needs, so that one can just basically deal with it without having to reprogram it every time. But I'm pretty much there, I think, and I hope that Maria's going to like it as well. Bye.